Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're taking a deep dive into a really interesting collection of texts.
Right.
They all speak to something pretty fundamental, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Facing, the hard stuff, difficulties, but also finding hope in the middle of it.
Absolutely. It's that core human experience.
So we've got bits from Psalms 30 and 98, the Gospel of John, chapter 16, and then Acts chapter 18. Quite a mix.
Yeah, different times, different authors, different situations even.
Exactly. And our mission, really, is to see how these scriptures, despite their differences, kind of converge on this powerful idea, this idea that sorrow, difficulty, it's not the end game.
Mm-hmm.
And that joy is actually promised. It's woven in somehow, even when things look darkest.
Right. So we're looking at the words they use, the stories they tell.
Yeah, what insights do they actually offer about getting through hardship, about trusting that, things can change, that transformation is possible?
And what strikes me right away is just how this theme pops up in such different kinds of writing. You've got like ancient poetry in the Psalms.
Right. Deeply personal sometimes.
Yeah. And then Jesus speaking really intimately directly to his followers in John. And then Acts gives us this almost historical play-by-play of early missionary work.
It does feel like more than just a fluke, doesn't it? Like it's a perspective that's really baked into these different parts of the biblical story.
I think so. It seems deeply embedded.
And when you think about enduring difficulty, there's one line from the Psalms that probably jumps out for a lot of people, right? Psalm 30, verse 5.
Oh, definitely. Weeping may stay for the night,
but rejoicing comes in the morning.
Yeah. It's so concise, but wow, it lands. It totally gets the reality of pain. That night part, the weeping is real.
Doesn't shy away from it.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But the power is in that pivot, isn't it? The contrast. Morning is coming, and it brings rejoicing. It paints this really stark, kind of beautiful picture. Sorrow's temporary, tied to darkness. Joy is promised, linked to the dawn.
So, okay, it acknowledges the pain, but it's like putting an expiry date on it, saying this isn't forever.
Exactly. Not the whole story.
And that feeling, that idea, it connects pretty directly to what Jesus tells his disciples in John 16, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's quite parallel in some ways. Jesus is getting them ready for him leaving.
Which he knows is going to absolutely floor them. Grief, confusion.
Totally. And he says this thing that sounds, well, pretty cryptic at first. A little while and you won't see me. Then again a little while, and you will see me.
And you can almost hear the disciples whispering, what's he talking about? A little while.
Right. They're scratching their heads. And Jesus sees it. He sees their confusion, their coming sorrow. And then he lays out this incredible promise in verse 20. Truly, truly, I say to you, you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will be sorrowful, but your sorrow will turn into joy.
Okay, hang on. Your sorrow will turn into joy. That phrasing is interesting.
It is, isn't it?
It's not just joy replaces sorrow or comes after it. It's like the sorrow itself somehow morphs, becomes the joy. How does that even work?
Well, the source notes obviously point towards the hope in his resurrection and return. But even just in the words here, anticipating his death, there's this feeling that the experience of the grief is somehow fundamentally connected to the joy that's coming.
Like the analogy he uses.
Exactly. The woman in labor. Intense pain. Agony even, but it's completely transformed, forgotten almost, the second the child arrives. The joy swallows the memory of the pain, or rather, reframes it.
Right, so the pain wasn't meaningless. It was the necessary path to the joy. It wasn't just something to endure and get past.
Yeah, it's almost like the fertile ground that the future joy actually springs from.
Wow. That really does shift the perspective quite a bit.
It does. It takes sorrow from being just this negative thing we have to suffer through to something that could actually be, well, catalytic, a catalyst for something new.
And speaking of transformation and joy after difficulty, Psalm 98 kind of zooms out, doesn't it? Takes it to a bigger stage.
It really does. It moves from that personal weeping in Psalm 30 to something much, much broader.
Yeah, it's this big call. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. Right off the bat, it's declaring victory.
Total victory declaration. His right hand and his holy arm have gotten him victory. Boom.
But then it adds this layer that feels really significant. The Lord has made known his victory. He has revealed his vindication in the sight of the nations.
That's the key, I think. The revelation. It's not just a private win.
Right. It's made known, revealed.
And who sees it? In the sight of the nations, for all the ends of the earth to witness and then, make a joyful noise about it.
So it connects God acting, overcoming whatever the difficulty was, not just to one person's mourning arriving, but to this, cosmic public announcement.
Yes. It takes the personal joy of Psalm 30 and just blows it up onto a global screen, a universal triumph that kind of demands this worldwide response of praise.
That universal scale.
Yeah.
It feels like a perfect setup for the story we get in Acts 18, where we see this kind of principle playing out, on the ground in the messy reality of Paul's mission work.
Right. So Paul shows up in Corinth.
And it sounds like he's had a bit of a rough go in Athens just before this.
Yeah, the text implies that. And he connects with Aquila and Priscilla, fellow refugees, actually, because they'd been booted out of Rome by Emperor Claudius.
Interesting detail.
And they share a trade, tent making, which is just a great little touch showing Paul wasn't just, preaching all day. He was working too.
Right, earning his keep. So he does his usual thing, goes to the synagogue every Sabbath, trying to persuade both Jews and Greeks. Seems okay at first.
For a bit. Then Silas and Timothy show up, and Paul seems to really double down on the preaching, testifying that Jesus is the Messiah.
That's when things get difficult.
That's where the friction really hits. The text says, when they opposed and reviled him, strong words, Paul has this very dramatic reaction.
What does he do?
He shook out his garments. It's this symbolic gesture, basically saying, okay, I'm done. This is on you now.
Like washing his hands of the situation.
Exactly. And he says, your blood be upon your heads. I am innocent. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles.
Oof. That sounds like a major setback. Opposition, public rejection from the very community he started with. You could easily see that as a low point, right?
Yeah.
A moment of real sorrow in his work there.
Definitely feels like hitting a brick wall. But what happens right after that? Literally the next thing.
He moves next door.
He literally moves next door. He leaves the synagogue, goes to the house of a guy named Titius Justus, a God-fearer, whose house happened to be right beside the synagogue.
Right.
And the turnaround is incredible. Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord together with all his household.
Wait, the ruler of the synagogue he was just basically kicked out of?
The very one.
Yeah.
And not just him, but his whole family. And it says, many of the Corinthians hearing Paul believed and were baptized.
So that moment of intense opposition, the rejection, Paul's night in the synagogue, it directly forces him to pivot, to physically move next door, which immediately leads to this wave of belief, including the leader of the group that just rejected him. It's like a live demonstration of setback becoming opportunity.
Exactly. Sorrow turning into a very visible, localized kind of joy and, well, victory.
It really brings that principle to life, doesn't it? The difficulty wasn't the end. It was the actual trigger for a change in direction that opened up this new, incredibly fruitful path.
Yes, it shows that this transformation, sorrow to joy, setback to victory. It isn't just like a nice poetic idea or some far-off future promise. It's something that can actually happen right here, right now.
And often because of the difficulty itself.
Often triggered by it. Yeah.
So pulling these threads together, we've got the personal tearful night giving way to morning joy in Psalm 30. We have Jesus promising that sorrow itself transforms into joy in John 16. And Psalm 98 shows this revealed victory on a global scale. And Acts gives us Paul's opposition leading him, unexpectedly, to this new fertile ground. This is a pretty consistent message emerging, wouldn't you say?
I think so. It feels very consistent.
That the hard times, the sorrow, the setbacks, they aren't the final word. And maybe, just maybe, the experience of going through them is part of the pathway to something new, something ultimately joyful, maybe even victorious.
Yeah, it's not just about gritting your teeth and enduring the night. It's about trusting the dawn is coming and maybe even seeing the night itself as this strange, unexpected preparation for it.
That synthesis feels right. It's not just getting through sorrow, but the potential for sorrow itself to be the mechanism, the surprising plot twist that actually leads to the breakthrough, the joy, the victory that others might even witness.
Well put.
So, okay, if that's the case, if sorrow can have this kind of transformative potential, what does this mean for you listening? It does raise a pretty important question. Think about the difficulties, maybe the sorrows that you or perhaps someone you know is facing right now. Could this perspective, that the sorrow isn't the end, that it might even be part of the journey towards transformation and a coming joy, could that offer maybe a flicker of hope? Or even just a different way of looking at the whole situation?